Hi everyone, today Mateo and I are joined by Ksenia, who is a board member of Feminists of Maastricht. Do you briefly want to introduce yourself?
Yes, hi, I'm a board member of Feminists of Maastricht, and Feminists of Maastricht is a strictly intersectional feminist group, and our self-understanding is inherently political. That means we are not neutral, and very proudly not neutral in various issues when it comes to oppression, for example, racial capitalism and anti-racism and so much more.
Okay, great, thank you. So maybe to start a little bit, we wanted to ask you what inspired you to become a feminist or to become a member of Feminists of Maastricht?
So when I knew that I was gonna move to Maastricht, actually the first thing I googled or checked on Instagram is Maastricht and feminism, and then the Instagram page of Feminists of Maastricht came up.
Okay.
And upon moving here, I went to one of their events, and I was really happy to kind of see that there's a feminist community already, which kind of represented values I also stood for.
And was it the only organization you found, or was there more in the first place when you were looking for something? Or
so it was the first organization I found, and also the first one that had an event. And then, as soon as I went there, I realized that there was a lot of shared and common values.
Okay.
Nice. Yeah. And do you feel like since you're a board member that your understanding of feminism has changed, or has it remained the same?
Oh, that's a huge question, actually.
I know.
Okay, so whenever you have a student organization, which as a board member you're not paid, so everything is depending on your individual, like how much you bring into it. So every board member also brings something new to the table, and at the beginning of each year, or like during summer, we kind of sit together and talk about what do we want to do in the next year. And I worked in a women's shelter, and I have a lot of experience on like peer-to-peer disclosure and working with people who experience sexual harassment and sexual violence. And unfortunately, upon moving to Maastricht, I had to realize that this is a very prevalent issue in this university. And so as a board member, we decided, or as board members together, we decided that it would be great if we, as Feminists of Maastricht, could contribute to that. So contribute to helping survivors or ensuring that there is some kind of security net for people. So there was a FoM established, which can be found in the link of our bio on Instagram. So it's an encrypted form where you can report sexual violence. And one of the major issues or major tasks we are confronted with is ensuring that people who report sexual violence are helped, or have someone to talk to. And so I guess going back to my understanding of feminism, it has become much more like community and care based. So it's much more like individual, bottom up, being there for your community and like standing in your everyday life with the values you have in terms of care and in terms of support, and not so much these like philosophical debates on something that is more abstract. So it's very like hands-on, very action-based, very
like down to earth.
I guess. Yes, that's also how you could say it. So it's less me thinking about how I can change the world, but just ensuring that the problems I encounter in my face, I deal with them in a proper way and in a way that kind of is, how you say it, when it's in line with my morals and my values. So
it's very interesting,
yeah, it actually has changed a lot.
That's cool.
Alright.
Okay. Yeah, now that I'm thinking about it, it has changed a lot.
And shaped by your experiences overall.
Yes, shaped by experiences, and also like realizing the necessity and the importance of politics of care, right? Like the importance of not taking yourself too seriously and being like, I will change the whole world, and just being like, okay, like I'm gonna change this, or I'm gonna care here, and providing this community support.
I find that very interesting because I feel like that's one of the main arguments, like, but what can I do about it? I can't change the world. And what you explain, it shows that you can do small things and it can make an impact.
Yeah, I guess it's like a lot about also empowering yourself, because you kind of like, it's very easy to say I can't change anything and then not do anything, and you can,
exactly.
But as soon as you realize that you can take certain steps to like ensure that the circle around you becomes better, like it does have an effect on people. And I don't know, for me it's just important to kind of like behave in the way that it's in line with my values, because otherwise I tend to have a bad image of myself. So
yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, kind of related to this idea of I can't change anything, what would you say to someone who might, for instance, argue, as we discussed before, that we no longer need feminism in the 21st century?
Yeah, so of course, reflecting on that might be connected to kind of the maybe Western perspective, right? That people are again focusing maybe much more on what is in front of their eyes rather than something that might be more far away or a problem that is more in depth or kind of hidden, right? So what would you answer?
Yeah, okay, so first of all, obviously, like, it's a very Western thing to be like super individualistic, and when you think about like your life, I believe that's inherently wrong, like in general, because as we established earlier, you should care about other people. That should be like the first like agreement you have. If you want to live in a society, you should agree to adhere to the rules of, you know, caring about other people, because that's what society consists of.
Yeah.
I kind of lost my train of thoughts right now. So you said thinking about these things are far away, so we don't really need them in our society.
Exactly.
Okay.
Like our civilization, right? The Western perspective might not need it anymore, since maybe people would argue, okay, the salaries of women are kind of as much as men. So what would you argue in that sense?
Okay, so there's so many like super problematic notions that I think we don't have the time to debunk all of that. In general, this is like a very privileged and very white-centered perspective. And as we said already, so your feminism should not be pay gap feminism. It should not be about becoming the next female CEO, because in the end, like, as a worker, I don't care if my oppressor is a female or a male. I don't care if my oppressor is, you know, like, if there's like 50% of you know, how do you call that, women CEOs in some company, while I get minimum wage. Like, we are, as Feminists of Maastricht, and as me as an individual, we are against any kind of oppression and any kind of hierarchy. So again, it's not about pay gap feminism. So someone who was to tell me we do not need feminism in the 21st century, I would say, like, where do we live? I'm sorry, but like, where do we live? Even if you argue that in this super privileged environment we are in this institution, just look at the prevalence of sexual violence and sexual harassment. Like, we have even research on that, amazing research made by Alice Verlum and Gisa Lange and a third person whose name I do not recall right now. We have such a huge issue in this city, in this university, in every university, where women and Flinter are systematically subjected to sexual violence and violence in general. So you can obviously like close your eyes and say we do not need feminism, but then you're just like.
And where does it happen more often, you would say? Like sexual harassment, for instance, where does it happen? Where does it happen more often? Do you think it's rather in the institutions we're sitting right now at, or maybe in parties, or which context would you say is kind of the most prevalent?
So there's a variety of factors that like increase the likelihood of encountering sexual violence.
Okay.
It is not necessarily like in class or when there's a lot of people around, but there's also a lot of statistics on it, and like if you want to check like what is the most likeliest situation to be encountered or to be confronted with sexual violence, I think it's so alcohol plays a role, being in a relationship plays a role, being a female plays a role, or identifying female plays a role. Yeah, and there's like a bunch of different criteria which like I don't drink alcohol, but like the rest of them I fit in all of them. So it's not like, if you look at the prevalence, it's like what? Yeah. Like alcohol.
It's a huge percentage of the cases, right? Alcohol.
Yeah.
So
not all of them, and like also it is a percentage, but not a big percentage.
Okay.
I'm just saying, like, out of all the students who are in this university, it is a huge percentage. It's like almost all the women, or like every second woman. Like, check the numbers. You can also like maybe add them to the description.
Yeah, we will do that. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I would quote Alice Vellum actually on that. It's a great research.
Okay.
Okay, maybe we can add it to the
Yes.
comment section. Or,
Yeah, also when it comes to this whole idea of, oh, we don't need feminism anymore, it's always like, what role should men take in? Because as we said before, like there's a stereotype that it's always feminists, always just like men hating women. And what do you, in your opinion, what role should men play in the cause of feminism?
Okay, I have two things to say to that.
Yes.
The first, that it's super typical for men to take a movement that is about, like, that is not about them,
Yeah.
and make it about them.
Mm-hmm.
Like, feminism is not necessarily in first.
It's
Like,
not
it's
only
not
for
about hating
women.
men,
Yeah.
and it's also not about, like, it's not just about women. It's
Mhm.
obviously, like, we have to acknowledge that patriarchy affects men so badly, and men also suffer under patriarchy, and men can also be victims of sexual violence. I'm not saying that. Just like, if you look at it, it's still unfortunately a very big gendered issue.
Mm-hmm.
Period. Part two is, how can you as a man support the feminist cause? Educate yourself. Like, it's 2023, there's so much sources, so much knowledge out there. You could be an expert, you could become an expert without even attending university, just based on like the information that is available. And do not rely on flinter educators to do all the emotional labor for you. And like, if you want to be an ally, then become an ally. Like,
But yeah, now there's kind of this new school of thought, right? That you have, it's very much gender based. That to act as a masculine person, you need to act in this way, in this certain way. And there's kind of this whole new trend, which might, of course, impact our lives to such a great extent. And yeah, it's very much gender based. So that's how I would react to what you've just said, right? That there's this whole new thing going on in social media, and about masculinity and what it means and what being feminine means, and maybe people might overthink it, right, and complicate the whole thing in some way, if you know what I mean.
I do. I think there is a person who is able to like say all of that much better than I would, which is J.J. Bowler. He has an amazing book called Don't Be a Man. No, it's called Mask Off. It's called Don't Be a Man in German. So maybe also good book recommendation to the readers, listeners, watchers.
Really cool that you recommend things. I like that.
Education.
Yeah.
Mask Off, J.J. Bowler.
We'll put it all in the description box.
Very good. Also, Feminism Interrupted by Lola Olufemi.
Great, thank you. I think with the whole like discussion about men, there's also this idea of intersectionality that comes in, and that's also what we discussed before, where you said that like in the Western context we might believe, oh, we don't need feminism, but then if we look at it from an intersectional perspective, then obviously there's a lot more to it. And yeah, intersectionality is an important aspect of feminism. Could you maybe say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess if your understanding of feminism is not intersectional, then you are strictly and simply reproducing white supremacy. And it all started with the first wave of feminism, where the suffragette movement, which consisted of white privileged women who would meet and debate their right to vote, right? While non-white women would take care of their children. And I mean, like, the whole notion is super problematic. So what are you telling me? So you only have a right to vote if you are not a woman. It's not about being a woman. It's then about being white and a woman. Like, it still has the whiteness.
Right.
So you always have to keep in mind all the different layers of suppression. How do you call it? Oppression. And in the first feminist movement, there was Sojourner Truth, amazing woman who then said, yo, guys, anti-woman, because she pointed out that the feminism they were speaking about, or the rights they were speaking about, were still so privileged. And it's about like debunking all these privileges and debunking all the different layers of oppression, and making sure that none of them is not spoken about. Because you could look at it as a pyramid, and I mean, I might be affected by sexism as a white woman, but I'm not affected by racism.
Exactly, yeah.
So the experience of a person who is a woman and a person of color is different than mine, and that's super important to acknowledge. And again, I'm able-bodied, for example, and the experience of a person who isn't then is also faced with ableism. So there's so many different layers of oppression, and it's so important to keep all of them in mind, because as soon as you only speak about like women's rights, and then you very quickly like go into this talk about like pay gap and female CEOs and blah blah blah, which like honestly I don't really care about.
So as a concluding remark, you would say the lack of inclusivity of maybe this mainstream feminism or liberal feminism is one of the main arguments against this kind of term, if you know what I mean?
No, I wouldn't say that, because I would say that white feminism and liberal feminism is definitely an insult to everybody who like is an actual feminist, and it's like trans exclusive radical feminists like TERFs, for example, or SWERFs, like bullshit, fuck that. But we still need to acknowledge that feminism per se is super important. It just needs to be the right feminism, and not like do not take the credibility of a movement just because of, you know, there's a bunch of stupid people. Because there's even like far right feminists, so-called, who just use feminism to kind of like postulate their stupid opinions against refugees, and that's not what feminism is about. It's about like fighting oppression of everybody.
In every sense.
In every sense.
Okay.
And love that you clarified that, because I feel like that's like the main argument I always run into when I talk with my friends or with family about feminism, is that when they think of feminism, they immediately have this like radical feminism in their head, and they're like, oh,
like
but
extreme, right?
And I think it's a wrong image of what real feminism stands for, and I think you really clarified that in a very beautiful way.
Yeah, but like I would consider myself a radical feminist, because when I speak about or think about feminism, for me it's just like acknowledging the different power dynamics and hierarchies that exist in the world, and they are not just about gender, they are also about class, they are also about socioeconomic status, they're also about race, they're also about sexuality. There's so many different layers to it, and in the end you need to acknowledge that like the underlying problem of patriarchy is like deeply enrooted into capitalism. So it's also about like economic power and economics and like colonialism and all these things that kind of led to the world being what it is today.
So how in that regards, how would you then, from how you view feminism or radical feminism, how would you attempt to define it if someone would ask you?
I mean, I guess everything that challenged the status quo is per se radical, like considered radical.
Okay.
So,
interesting. Yeah.
Because my feminism also challenges capitalism, and also challenges all the different intersecting identities and like ways of oppression, forms of oppression.
Yeah.
That makes it radical. And so feminism for me is not just about gender. It's not about men and women, because also there is not just two genders, right?
Of course.
So I usually prefer the word Flinta, I don't know. But I kind of again lost my train of thought. So how would I define feminism or radical feminism? Like keep in mind all the different ways of oppression, and like really keep them in mind, and really like focus on these things, and make sure that you use your privileged position as a person who's, you know, able to attend to university and able to, you know, even attend this location. Like this room is so like maybe there's wheelchair access, but I mean even that is so like there's so many barriers to being here right now. So
I see what you mean.
Keep that in mind.
Right. Acknowledging maybe the privilege and that we're lucky, of course, to be sitting here.
But also, I don't like the notion of, you know, feeling lucky, because I don't think you should, you know, use other people's oppression to kind of be like, I'm so lucky, you know? Like,
I know what you mean.
Yeah, I had so many
that we're the best, right? Like being sitting here. That's
yeah, but also and then I went to this country in Southeast Asia, and there I just knew how lucky I'd been my whole life. Like, what the fuck? Like, shut up. Like, that's so disgusting.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Right. So it's kind of taking in this Western stance or perspective, right?
Exactly. And like, acknowledge your privilege, educate yourself, read and listen, and give a voice to everybody who is not as privileged as you are, maybe, and like ensure that their perspectives are being heard, because we live in a society and we attend a university which tells the stories of those who are always heard, right? Or what do we learn? Like, who came up with the knowledge we learn?
Yeah.
Including
I love
remarks.
that.
Okay.
It's a bit chaotic, maybe.
No, it's great. You're doing very well. So maybe to kind of wrap it up, we could like talk about what advice you would give to someone who's interested. But I mean, you kind of said that right now, in becoming involved in the feminist movement. It doesn't know where to start. It's what you said, like, educate yourself, listen, read.
Like, there's so
many resources.
Many amazing people of color, indigenous people. Yes, Bell Hooks, Angela Davis. I don't know. There's like Lola Olufemi. Like, the list is never ending, basically.
Yeah.
You can read, like, put all of them in the info box.
We will do that.
Right.
And also, feel free to reach out to Feminists of Maastricht and like attend an event of ours and tell us if you have a certain idea about wanting to see a certain event happening, because we are trying or striving to be as inclusive as possible, because obviously we're not perfect, and we also have a very like limited perspective on things, but we are always open to educate ourselves. Right. So if you feel like one topic is missing, just suggest it, and we will make sure to at least try everything to make it happen. And I think it's super important to kind of also acknowledge not just your privilege, but also the position you are taking and the space you're taking up in a certain room, and like to which kind of power dynamic might you be contributing, even without
knowing it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Do you want to tell us maybe a little bit more about projects you're working on for Feminists of Maastricht, or?
Yeah, I mean, we have Pride coming up. It's gonna be huge. We also still need stewards. If you are interested in helping us doing crowd management at Pride, shoot us a message.
Okay. If anyone's interested,
maybe one of the listeners. Hopefully.
So that's coming up on the 24th of June. Then we have the Anger Festival, and this is something we already did once in October. So the whole idea or notion of it is that, how do I start? Okay, so anger, right, is viewed as something not stereotypically female, as in if you think about like the role society wants you to play, it's this pleasant, nice,
very
and like reserved person. And when you then Google, how to deal with anger, they will tell you something like, go for a walk, or breathe, or meditate, or smile. And actually, anger is something that is, or can be, such a healthy, constructive feeling, because it, like, why do we experience anger? It shows you that something is happening you're not happy with. So in order to change the status quo we are not happy with, we need to like acknowledge this anger and then do something with it. And what we're kind of trying to do is like giving people the opportunity, and not just Fleeta, like anybody who wants to come can come, giving people the opportunity to kind of deal with that anger or express it in a certain way. And then there's like theories and psychology on how to deal with anger properly, so it doesn't become aggression, because aggression is when anger becomes like destructive and bad. But on the first hand, it's all about expressing yourself, and maybe and screaming or destroying something, but something in a safe space where you can destroy something and then you can deal with it. Or I don't know, what else did we do? We did boxing, we did like physical expression of anger, but not the one where you hurt someone else, but the one where you like maybe just like become stronger in the end. Like boxing, for example, can be also used to deal with anger, or these things. Or I don't know, art can be also a beautiful way to express anger or express these kinds of emotions. So come.
you guys are very creative.
Yeah.
Very diverse.
Yeah. My mom does art therapy.
Oh, that's cool.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah. What else? We have a spoken word event coming up at the living room. I think on the 15th.
What's that exactly?
Like poems.
Oh,
like people
like
want to
slam
talk and
poetry?
yeah, pretty much.
Oh, cool.
So check out our Instagram.
Feminists of Maastricht.
In the comments as
We will
well.
leave it in the description box. Okay. Anything else you want to say? Anything you want to add?
No, I don't think so.
No.
No.
Okay. Well then, thank you so much for being here, participating, and thank you to everyone for listening. I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you in the next one. There would be a next one. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.